Okay, so have you ever wondered, like, what is it about war? It's been around forever, right? Why do we keep doing it? It's a question a lot of people have. And today we're really diving deep into this idea of why war?
Yeah, it's a huge question.
It feels huge.
Yeah.
And to help us unpack it, we're turning to Richard Overy's book, Why War? So good. And the cool thing is he doesn't just stick to like dates and battles and the history, which is fascinating, but he goes beyond that.
Yeah, he brings in all these different perspectives.
Yes.
Biology, psychology,
Anthropology.
even climate change.
Right. Like how do all these things play into this thing we call war?
It's really fascinating. Gives you this much more complete picture. You know, it's not just one thing. Overy really digs into like a century's worth of research to try to unpack this.
And he starts with this really interesting story. Imagine it's 1931. Albert Einstein gets an invitation
From
League of Nations.
Yeah.
And they're like, hey, we want to prevent future wars.
lofty goal.
Right. So Einstein, because he's Einstein, he reaches out to Sigmund Freud,
Wow.
the father of psychoanalysis. Can you imagine being in that room?
What a pair.
Right. And they're like, Sigmund, what's the deal with war?
And what'd he say?
Okay, so Freud, he was kind of a downer. He basically said, good luck with that.
Oh, no.
Yeah, he believed humans have this death drive, this like self-destructive impulse.
So he's saying we're hardwired for war.
That's basically what he's saying.
Wow.
But, and here's where it gets really interesting. This whole exchange between Einstein and Freud, it kind of kicked off this debate, this argument that's still going on today. Is war in our nature, or is it something we create?
That's the question, isn't it? It's like nature versus nurture, but on a global scale.
Exactly. And to try to figure that out, we have to go way back
Way back.
to our early ancestor.
Okay.
Talking caveman days. And you've probably heard those theories, right? Comparing early humans to chimpanzees.
Fighting over territory, resources.
Right, survival of the fittest, but with, clubs instead of nukes.
Exactly. And some researchers believe that whole drive to survive, to get the resources, to find a mate, it might have actually favored the more aggressive males.
So like those caveman stereotypes, maybe they're not too far off.
Could be. But there's another side to this.
Oh.
Some anthropologists argue that early hunter-gatherer societies were actually pretty peaceful.
Really?
Yeah, they point to the fact that there's not a lot of evidence of warfare among these really early groups.
So which is it? Peaceful coexistence or prehistoric battlefields?
Right, well, there's this 9,000-year-old skull. Archaeologists found it in Germany. And get this, there's an arrowhead lodged right in the skull.
Ouch. Okay, that doesn't sound very peaceful.
Nope, not at all. So clearly violence has been a part of the human story for a long time.
Okay, so if they're fighting way back then, what's the motivation? Why were they fighting?
Well, it might not have always been about resources, For many cultures, war wasn't just practical. It was deeply intertwined with their beliefs.
Their beliefs.
Yeah, their cosmology, their whole understanding of the universe.
So it's like war became a ritual.
In a way, yeah. Think about the warrior class. In so many cultures, warriors were revered. They were seen as these heroes, guardians, almost like intermediaries between the physical world and the spiritual world.
Wow, so it's like war became this extension of their beliefs, shaping their entire worldview. Okay, so we've talked about early humans, but get ready for this climate change.
Yeah.
Could a warming planet actually lead to more conflict? It sounds crazy, but Overy says it's happened before.
It's not that far-fetched when you think about it.
Really?
Yeah, imagine a drought wiping out your crops, or massive floods displacing communities. Historically, these kinds of big environmental shifts, they often led to conflict over resources.
Makes sense, like that saying, whiskey is for drinking, water is for fighting over.
Exactly. And speaking of fighting over resources, that's been a constant throughout history.
Oh, yeah, definitely.
From ancient empires battling over fertile land to, today, with countries vying for oil and gas, the pursuit of resources has always been a huge driver of conflict.
It's like this never-ending tug of war with, oil fields or gold mines or whatever as the prize. But Overy also digs into something a bit less tangible, the power of ideas. Religious wars, ideological clashes, these conflicts are fueled by something much deeper than just land or oil.
It's true. Beliefs can be incredibly powerful, right?
Totally. And it makes you think about, like, someone like Joan of Arc.
Oh yeah, good example.
She wasn't driven by, like, wanting more land or anything like that. It was this deep belief. She felt like she was chosen to fight for her faith, for her nation.
And that conviction, that belief, it's a powerful motivator for going to war, wouldn't you say?
Absolutely. It's like those beliefs become this lens that shapes how they see the entire world, justifying their actions, even if it means violence.
Right. And it's not just religion, of course.
No, not at all.
We see it with political ideologies too, all throughout history.
Totally. Which kind of leads us to another big player in this whole war thing, power, just this pure drive for power.
Oh yeah, that's a big one.
It's like a constant theme, right?
Totally.
Emperors, conquerors, dictators, they all seem to have this hunger for more.
It's like this insatiable appetite that's never satisfied.
Exactly. And he uses ancient Rome as an example, how they were like obsessed with securing their borders, always pushing outward.
Because for them, true security meant controlling more territory.
Right. They wanted to make sure no one could even think about attacking them. But even with their legions, their fortifications, everything, their empire crumbled.
They overextended, spread themselves too thin. It's a classic mistake.
And a good reminder, I guess, that even the mightiest empires can fall.
Definitely. And speaking of empires, we can't talk about this drive for power without talking about Napoleon.
Oh yeah, Napoleon. Talk about ambition. He was constantly redrawing the map of Europe, convinced that security meant expanding his empire no matter the cost.
And he was brilliant,
Oh, militarily, he was a genius.
Right, but he also understood the importance of perception. Like, he cultivated this image of invincibility.
He was like a rock star.
Right, which of course just made his conquests even easier. But, like Rome, Napoleon's ambition eventually got the better of him.
It's like history is a giant game of risk, but with much higher stakes.
And unfortunately, the board never really changes, does it?
True. And Napoleon's not the only one. Hitler, too. Another example of this toxic mix of ideology, insecurity, this lust for power.
Absolutely. Overy too talks about how Hitler was a master at exploiting people's fears.
Yeah, like after World War I, Germany was in a tough spot.
Economically devastated, humiliated. And Hitler, he used that. He used propaganda to convince people that their security, their very identity was under threat.
And they were vulnerable, so they clung to his message. It's frightening how easily fear and resentment can be twisted into a weapon like that. All of these historical examples, they make you wonder, with everything going on today, is this idea of security even more complicated now?
Yeah, I mean, the world's a different place now, right?
Totally.
We're facing all these new challenges, things our ancestors never could have imagined, like climate change. That's already shaking things up.
That's true. Resources are getting squeezed, people are being forced to move. It's like we're seeing those historical patterns, the ones we talked about. They're playing out in real time, but on this global scale.
Exactly. It's not just about one border anymore. And then on top of that, you've got cyber warfare, which is wild. I mean,
It's like something out of a movie.
totally, but it's real. And it has the potential to be just as devastating as any traditional war. I mean, think about it. Nation states, even smaller groups, they can cause chaos with the click of a button.
It's true. You could cripple power grids, mess with financial systems, even influence elections. It's a whole new battleground.
Right. And the scariest part is it's so much harder to defend against, because what even counts as an act of war in the cyber realm?
It's true. It's like the lines between war and peace, they're getting blurrier all the time. We've got state-sponsored hacking, disinformation campaigns. It's like this constant low-level conflict simmering beneath the surface.
Exactly. And that's what Overy calls hybrid warfare, right?
Yeah, tell me more about that.
So it's this idea that traditional military force, it's not enough anymore. Now it's all about combining that with propaganda, economic pressure, cyber attacks, all these different tools to achieve your objectives without ever actually declaring war.
So it's like, it's not about who has the biggest army anymore, it's about who can control the narrative, who can manipulate perceptions the best.
Right, controlling information, control the world. So after this deep dive into, centuries of war, the quest for security, this whole changing landscape of conflict, where does that leave us?
That's the big question, isn't it? Are we, destined to repeat all of this? Is war just an inevitable part of being human?
Well, Overy doesn't give us a simple answer, which I appreciate. But he makes this point that while we might have this, this ancient instinct for aggression, the world we build,
The choices we make.
exactly,
Yeah.
our social structures, the systems we create, that's what really determines whether that aggression turns into full-blown war.
So it's not set in stone. We have a choice.
We do. We can keep going down this road of, competition and mistrust, this us versus them mentality, or we can try something different.
We can build a different kind of world.
Right. Invest in things like diplomacy and cooperation. Find solutions that work for everyone involved.
It's tough, but it's incredibly hard.
But it feels hopeful. So really, this whole deep dive, it's about understanding the why of war so we can start to build something better.
Exactly, because when we know better, we can do better.
And that's what we have to hold on to. This idea that the future isn't predetermined, it's not set in stone. We have the power to create a different reality.
It's a choice we have to make every single day. And on that note, thanks for joining us for this deep dive. We hope it's given you a lot to think about.
Definitely.
And we'll see you next time.